Hi everybody. Hi everybody. Hi everybody, and welcome back to the Talking About the Big Stuff podcast with Michael Cole and Matthew Cravat. I am Michael Cole.
And I am Matthew Cravat.
Anyway, welcome back to Talking About the Big Stuff. We have a guest on today, Patrick Brennan, who will be my guest co-host because my other co-hosts are at different things. And it was a great excuse to have you on.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you for coming back. This is like your third or fourth time on the podcast.
I think so, cool. Yeah. At least three, but I think maybe there was a fourth one there I'm not remembering.
Yeah. I think you've been on twice alone, once with Wes, and then this is your third alone time, so fourth time total.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah. And then if you haven't already, hit like and subscribe. I need to start asking at the beginning because asking an hour in, a lot of people have already signed off. So hit like and subscribe. We'll talk about Patreon stuff at the end of the video, which is a great way to help us, but that will be linked below. All right, tonight's topic, we're going to be talking about, I forget exactly how I worded it, but being woke, or trying to be woke. I mean, being woke's kind of a moving target. Trying to be woke while also having a dark, offensive, fucked up sense of humor, which I think at least Pat can definitely attest to the fact that I fit into the category of trying to be woke and having a fucked up sense of humor.
Yeah. No, I definitely, when you said that, I was like, am I really a dark sense of humor? And then I thought about like some of the things I've said to you over the years. Yes, I think I have a dark sense of humor too. But yes, and trying to be woke all the time, trying to be better about everything. But
yeah. Well, and I think that, I don't know if you saw the thumbnail I made for the episode, but it's a picture of Cleavon Little from Blazing Saddles. Because one of the things that being woke, like that the left is constantly being like attacked for, is that you can't even joke anymore. You can't even, and there's a lot of people like us who I think are like, hey, you could joke all you want, pretty much. Right. Like, it's not a big deal. And then from what I've seen, apparently Gen Z, and there's a lot of Gen Z that is even more intense than we are, in some ways. But I thought that, I think we know, you and I know, and hopefully some of the audience knows that, like, there's a lot of projection in that because they get offended about everything.
Right.
But like also on top of that, like there's this weird zone of like we're expected to be this thing, and I think we are kind of in two worlds here.
Right. No, I think that's an interesting thing. Like, and like speaking of that, like I just saw that Rainn Wilson was on Fox News saying that you couldn't make The Office today because of woke, and it's like, it's The Office. What was even offensive on that show?
Like, the first 3 or 4 episodes, there was an episode where Steve Carell did the black people versus N-words bit from Chris Rock, but they do beep him out, but I don't even remember. I don't know.
Right, but it's also like the point of all those jokes on that is like, this is the dumbest man that you've ever seen making these jokes. Like, that would be 100% allowed still. But like, there's also just like, I think about this all the time because I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I listen and like, engage with, comedy and everything, where it is very, like edge of, good taste and stuff like that. But it's all coming from the left, and it's not like, we're like, oh, it's not like being racist or anything like that, but it's, like just being real about things and, actually talking about, and no one cares. No one's ever going to be like, oh, you can't listen to this. This has to be removed from the airways or anything like that, because who is going to complain about it? Because everyone can understand what's a joke, or there are people that don't understand that, but like most people do get when something is a joke, and trust the person telling the story or sharing the joke that this is a character and this is reality. There's two different things.
There's also like a huge there's a lot of shifting that goes on too that people don't necessarily want to account for. So it's you can't do this anymore. And it's like, well, first of all, The Office is a terrible example.
Right.
The one that comes up is Blazing Saddles all the time. Is that like but like a lot of time, I think it was Mel Brooks. Somebody said it was really hard to make Blazing Saddles in 1974. Like it was never easy. But also like the you can't make. I mean, I don't know if you could make it or not. Let's not touch it. Let's don't remake it. But like whether or not you could or couldn't make that, what you couldn't do is like, you were getting away with a lot of racism stuff back then.
Yeah.
But the thing that they left out, the thing that they cut out because it was too far, was a joke about how big his dick was.
Yeah.
And like, that's the only joke that gets cut is about how big. And yes, it is a racial stereotype, but that's not why it gets cut. It gets cut because it's an oral sex joke.
Right.
And it's like, so yeah, you can make oral sex jokes because it's a consensual joke. It's not like a rape joke.
Right.
And so like, that's where we've shifted is like, oh yeah, we don't, like, not that it's a joke thing, but like if you look at Hamilton's kind of a ridiculous thing when you see that like Thomas Jefferson is giving Hamilton shit about this consensual affair he had while he has a 12-year-old slave that he is having sex with. And it's like that was the time that like that Alexander Hamilton was the more controversial figure, and we've shifted to what is a more naturalistic worldview of the way it should be. Same thing with racism versus like sex in general, right? And so I think that there's a lot of that doesn't get accounted for. Is that you can, I mean, there are things, I mean, not to say that dirty jokes haven't existed forever, but you couldn't say so much on TV or even in movies. Blazing Saddles is only 10 years older than us, right? So like 10 years before us, yes, there's a lot of racism, but the idea of making that the joke is the dick is so big that she thinks she's sucking on his elbow or vice versa is absolute. Like that is not even that intense of a sex joke.
No, that is something that you could probably hear on network TV now. Like it's pretty relatively tame, but I think the thing. I think that's an interesting thing to sort of bring up about like the morality that gets kind of put on display. And I was just thinking about this the other day about like how much what constitutes bad taste is often kind of this like there's we see articles all the time about the danger that low birth rates cause, and that's like such like a giant issue, an existential issue of our time. And I'm always looking at him and I'm thinking, this is always framed as like, this is a negative. It doesn't matter what media outlet's putting it out. It's the New York Times or if it's Elon Musk talking about it. They're always kind of talking about the same way, like, what are we going to do about this? But the reality of the situation is like, it's bad taste to say it, but to say like, no, it's a good thing that birth rates are, potentially going to be lower, because that means women have the right to choose, not just like in terms of abortion and birth control, but also can choose not to have sex, like can choose not,
I can choose not to get married and like, and then be,
right. Or like all of us have the choice to say, hey, like, I'm someone that doesn't have kids. I never really wanted kids, so I don't have kids. That would have put me in a very like weird social position, even 30 years ago, where now it's like, let's just, kind of everyone just rolls with it, and that's fine, except for these weird birth rate people, So it's
those are the same people that don't want you to kill babies,
right?
But if there's less babies to kill.
Exactly.
And I'm not talking about
to make, but
and I'm not talking about a bobos. I'm talking about because you and we grew up in the age of the dead baby joke.
Yeah. I mean, that was coming out of high school and then going to college and meet new friends and making those jokes. Hard lesson to learn.
what we grew up in such, and I'm sure every generation feels like this to some extent, but like between like us being kind of the first internet generation, like you know, like when we were hitting puberty, like there, you know, our generation was, there's a good chance that you were like mixed medium on what you were using for spank material, and not, and that is, you know, the generation before there, mixed medium might meant video, like cassettes versus Playboy, and the generation after us might have meant like, do I want to listen to audio on my iPhone or video? But like we were the, like, we can get print materials, and we can go to get a VHS.
I think about that all the time, like not even from a porn perspective, but like I think about the fucked up things that we could see on the internet, you know, in 2003.
2 Girls, 1 Cup.
Yeah, like that rotten.com. I don't know if you ever went there, like where it's like, it was like pictures of dead bodies, and like it's like really fucked up stuff.
Back to the humor thing. So did you see any, do you watch the roasts at all?
Not really. I've seen them, you know, a long time ago, and I see clips once in a while, but not really something I like seek out.
So I think I've watched most of the roasts over the last 10, 15 years because I like them. I think that yes, they're wild and sometimes awful, but like it doesn't bother me. And the Kevin Hart one got a lot of attention because of 2 specific jokes that one that the left thought was too far. And one that the right thought was too far. And I personally thought that the joke that offended the left was offensive. That being said, like, it's a roast, right? But I also think like, and that was one of the things that they kept saying during you know, defense of it, is it's a roast. It's a roast. It's like 2 things about the roast. And Matthew was telling me this earlier. We did some filming this morning, and he was saying, you know, the roasts used to be like a like, this is our private club, this is where we tell these jokes, and then they started televising it. And I think about that, and it's like, yeah, if our group text, you and me and Wes, our group text got out, like some of that shit's not gonna like fly the same way that it will in our context, not because we're not, you know, there are, you know, it's not like the group text that the TPUSA kids had a year and a half ago.
Yeah, we're not saying anything like you know,
but
wildly inappropriate. But
and, you know, and there was no joking there, right? Like that was very clearly like, you know, sometimes they mask bad things with saying it's a joke. If you read ours, you'd be like, oh, this is a joke. Clearly, but like, and these guys should be older than this, maturity wise. But but I was thinking about that, and the fact that like, okay, so that when you take that context on the roasts, you know, there's a bit of that. Once you go to televising it, which happened in like 2000, it's been a while, you get into the realm of like, you have to deal with audience blowback, and there is a lot of leeway on those roasts, but that doesn't mean there's an impossible runway of leeway, because Gilbert Gottfried lost his Geico or one of those commercial deals. Affleck. Because he lost that because he made a 9/11 joke like 6 weeks or something after 9/11. And so like, and that's, you know, that's 25 years this year, like, you know, and so when they're talking about like, oh, you know, the roasts have always been edgy, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, the roasts have often had consequences. Like they're, you know, they're not, you're not getting off. And Anthony Jeselnik has a thing where he says like, if you can get away, like getting away with the joke is what makes it an art. Like if you can say the offensive thing, and part of that is that, like, you know, when we watch Archie Bunker or when we watch Blazing Saddles, you recognize that while there is racist language and racist tropes, the message isn't racism. And that isn't as clear on roasts, but it's definitely not as clear on, you know, like the one joke was it was a joke about George Floyd, and it was Tony Hinchcliffe, who's already kind of like, you know, pissed off a bunch of people for and it was a bad taste joke. And I get that, like, I also get that black people were significantly more upset about it than I am for. But like, to me, I think that, like, yeah, if you piss off people, you're gonna piss off people. Like, there are times when I watch them and I'm like, well, I don't want to see that person. They seem like they suck. You know, like, Ann Coulter showing up at one of the roasts in the last 10 years doesn't make me go, oh, she's a good sport. Like, you're not like, it's not like a pass to, like, just, you know, accept this person.
Right.
And I think, and I've said this a few weeks ago, because Tony Hinchcliffe's been in the news a lot because of that. And I guess he has a special, which I haven't seen. You know, when he was doing the Madison Square Garden bit, or bits that he did for, you know what I'm talking about? That was the Trump rally on, it was when he did that rally, you know, some of those jokes that he said, like, people were really upset about. And I was like, honestly, like, those are the kind of jokes where, like, if I had Puerto Rican friends and we had, like, the relationship that, like, me and Adam have, I would make those jokes and it would be no big deal. But it's because, you know, like, and I tell, you know, I actually have told
context though too.
Well, context, like, I've told Logan, I'm like, you know, I joke with Adam in a way that I don't joke with other, like, I don't joke with people that I think it will give permission to be a bad person to. So, like, if, you know, like, Adam and I say stuff to each other and it's, you know, it can be really, it hasn't been really intense in a long time, but it can be, like, still somewhat, like, racially charged stuff, like, jokingly. But I wouldn't, like, oh, this guy might be a Klan member, I'm going to say it to him too because he'll find it funny. Because then you're just giving someone, like, permission. And so, like, that's where I think that, like, that Tony Hinchcliffe joke is, you know, you did it to essentially a Nazi rally. Like, they were literally, like, mimicking a Nazi rally that, like, in their presentation. And, like, if you had told that joke in, you know, in a club with that was predominantly Puerto Rican, and, you know, like, you would get a very different, you might get some, like, some what do you call it, heckling, but you would you know, it would become more, it's more playful.
Right. It's all, I mean, like, there's a certain level, I think, of where it comes down to trust, you know, like, where the context comes with that. Like, when you're joking with Adam knows you and he knows your heart. He knows you're not, you know, racist or anything like that. And
minimally racist.
Right. But, like, you know, as racist as we all are, but, you know, like, and that you wouldn't just do it with some, like, random black person on the street who you don't know, because there's no trust there, you know? And I think it's the same thing, like, in that hypothetical club full of, you know, half full of Puerto Rican people. It's like, they have come out to see this comedian and they hopefully know his deal. And you know, if they have that back and forth of heckling and stuff like that, that can build that level of trust. And I don't know, you know, Tony Hinchcliffe, if he would be able to pull that off in that, you know, like, you know, but, like, the fact that he did it to basically a Nazi rally kind of tells me probably not, but, you know, like, that is the, you know, it's all about that. Like, if you know the person, even if you don't know them personally, but you know enough about them to know, like, oh, I have a certain level of trust with them, they can do basically anything they want, you know, it doesn't really matter at that point, you know, that's,
and that carries over to a lot of things in life where, you know, not just joking, but, like, you know, like, context matters. And I was like about to use this example, and I'm, like, realizing that many guys wouldn't understand what I'm about to say, but, like, you can say things to your wife or girlfriend or your sister, or, you know, like, like, I could say things to Sarah that, like, in the privacy, you know, if we're just in the car and Logan's not there, like, let's say we're just driving around, I could say some pretty awful, like, dirty things, or, like, playfully dirty, or, you know, like, I could say terrible things, and she can say terrible things, and it's not a big deal. Whereas if I said it to some rando girl, like, she's going to be like, oh, this guy might be a rapist. And, like, and I'm realizing, you know, I was going to use that as an example, as not a joking thing, like, so, you know, and then I realized, like, oh, there are guys who definitely don't get the difference, because that's essentially what catcalling is like, talking to her like, you know, her, you know, and like, you know, in aggressive.
And probably a lot of them, it doesn't excuse it, and I would not excuse this in any way. don't realize that they're doing really anything wrong. They're just standing up and yelling at a woman walking by because they think that's the relationship I have with, a beautiful woman on the street, and that's
and I'm realizing more and more how clueless men are, that in ways that I didn't recognize. Like there's the stereotypical like sitcom-y like, oh, I didn't realize, must be her period, like period kind of jokes. But like, I'm realizing that like, so I defended this the other day, and I realized how bad it sounded for a moment, but can you hear the dogs? So, that there's, if you asked 95% of men in America, or if you asked all the men in America, some ridiculous percentage would say that they could beat Serena, or they could score a point on Serena Williams. Right. There's that statement, and it sounds so sexist and misogynistic when you hear it. And I realized, because of how clueless in all these other contexts men are, that I don't think it is misogynistic. I think it's clueless, because those same men think that they could score a touchdown against an NFL team. It's like, or that they could potentially fight a bear. Like these are things that they say. I'm like, oh yeah, men are like, not me. Like I know that I couldn't do any of those three things. It's
more delusional than actually like actively sexist, But,
not to say that it isn't, that the result isn't the same, but like, there is, and I think that same cluelessness is what leads us to. I mean, we all have that friend where like I can get away with certain things that other people can't. You my friend Kevin.
Yeah.
Well, like I will make fun of someone, or like Adam or you or something, and if he was there, he doesn't always, or lots of friends actually don't pick up on. Chris is kind of like this too, where they don't pick up on that. Like I have a relationship with you that's and they don't necessarily, and so there is a lot of that. And if you take that and magnify that by like, well, Mike said a racist joke one time in front of a black guy, I could say it in front of all black people, or or Mike said this dirty thing, and it's like there's a whole bunch of factors,
and I think that is something that kind of is worth always bringing up in these, is like, where is the responsibility that you have, like as someone that, like we said, trying to be woke, trying to, keep up with it, and, and actively working on ourselves to do that. But, like, do feel comfortable in, certain contexts of, like making, like, I don't know, I have, like queer friends who I feel comfortable, like kind of making a little bit of an off-color queer joke, or like, my girlfriend is Indian, and we kind of do like, not racist jokes, but like we make jokes about this stuff. Like I always say that I'm not that I'm a person of color because I'm Irish, not white, like I know that's not true, but like, that is but
and that's cool to say with her, but like in other
like I wouldn't just say that to like, I would like walk up to someone at like a Black Lives Matter rally and be like, hey, I'm with you, I'm a person of color too, like that that's a total
pink.
But, like, but there's a certain amount of responsibility that comes with that, to know like okay, like I can do this in certain contexts. I also got to be conscious of, I know, my friend who isn't going to pick up on the social cue of this is here, and I might need to limit myself a little bit in front of them, or, I need to know that this is, that, or, if something doesn't land, having the responsibility to say, hey, like, I hope you know that I didn't mean that. That doesn't matter. I still offended you, and I'm so, like deeply sorry. Like, like, treating it as like I crossed the line, and there's nothing wrong with saying you're sorry, because that is something that we're all.
That's a huge part of the problem, is that people don't want to apologize for anything.
Exactly. If it's
seen as weakness, or it's like like it's a strength. Like
yes, absolutely. And even in like the context of like something like a roast, there's ways that you can explain it even without necessarily apologizing, with saying like, listen, this comes from a long tradition of doing this sort of stuff, like you have to go into it with a certain mindset, and that is what like you can kind of get away with it maybe without an apology, if depending of course on the joke, but it's all about, like making sure people know that, it's building that trust and building that, context.
And the trust, and it's not perfect. Like you said, like sometimes you cross the line. That's something that I've been explaining to Logan, because, we're at this age, Logan's at this age, and that's an interesting thing about parenting as me parenting, is that like he's making jokes, and there are sometimes when I'm like, if it was me and my friends, we would absolutely say this, but you're a 10-year-old and I just don't know if you know. So like we have a lot of conversations.
Right.
I'm a joke killer right now. And I afterwards I told him, like, dude, like, I don't know. I don't know what, exactly what the dynamics of your, there's too many people. I just don't think you're there yet. I'm like, you need to be careful because you're at an age where you understand enough, but not all of it in a way. And I'm like, and I'm, so much older, and I've been joking in these ways so much longer. I still sometimes slip up and piss somebody off or go over the line or whatever. And I'm like, and it's shitty. And so you have to still, you have to be aware. And, and then he does this like thick Asian accent. And I'm like, dude, I don't think you should be doing that accent. And he stopped doing it for a long time. Like, he heard it from he has a friend that was doing it. His two cousins do it, and he would hear it. And I said, dude, like, stop. And he was really good about stopping. But in the last year or year and a half, he's made like a ton of Asian friends who, some of whom like moved to the US since they were born, and they are doing the voice, making fun of their parents, and they're totally cool with Logan doing the voice. Yeah. Like, and he said to me that one day, he goes like, oh yeah, like, we all do it. Like, it's so much fun. Like, we have so much fun doing it. All my friends. And literally, like, when I say, like, he went to a birthday party where he was the only white kid. Like, so it's not like a matter of like, there's like one Asian kid giving them all permission. It's he is the minority in that tiny little microcosm. And so he was like, oh yeah. And I said, okay, I understand. I want you to be careful. And you do not do it when their parents are around. I'm like, because you don't want to offend their parents, because their parents may not get that it's a joke. And like, there's a difference between me making fun of my parents and some other random kid making fun of my parents. Like, my parents will be like somewhat hurt if they hear me going, my parents are so stupid. Like, and not so stupid. That's not what I'm thinking when I say it, with our accent. You know what I'm talking about. And he said, but like, if you called my parents that, like, my parents were like, all right, the fuck is, and so I'm trying to get through to him on that. And that's really weird to be having that conversation. Or like, there was 2 or 3 years ago, before we had the sex conversation, all the kids are like 69, and I'm like, dude, like, you don't understand. And when you learn what it is, you're going to be so embarrassed that you said it in front of grandma and grandpa. And now he doesn't do it anymore. Now that he knows what it is, roughly. I don't know. I don't know exactly how much detail he knows.
I remember when I learned about that, I had like a vague idea, and it was probably,
he when we had the sex talk, he was like, so, and we were like, and so I gave like a very very surface level, like, well, like, I wasn't like, well, you really want to get in there.
And when you're old enough to actually try it, you're probably going to find out it's really not that fun.
I think it's really fun, but it's like, it's just not, it's overwhelming sometimes.
Not my favorite. Just, rather take turns, personally.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, no, I'm at this age, no, but also like, my back is so bad that like, I have to be on top all the time, in every position.
Mm-hmm. But that's like, I think that's like the perfect example of just like, like, you're teaching him to have boundaries about this stuff and understand, like, where it might not be appropriate, but where it's allowed and where it's not, and where it's, like, where it's, okay, kids having immature fun to, this is hurting people, like, where that boundary gets hurt, gets crossed, And
it's so weird because, like, not only is it this new generation, like, I think if you're prior to the last 5-6 years, I would have thought like, oh, kids are so much better than we were.
Yeah.
Like they're so much not more innocent, but like they're just kinder, and then now I'm realizing like, oh, no, that's not true. This is universal.
Right.
But also like we're in a very multicultural area. There's apparently 48 different countries represented at his school, which is not that big of a school.
Yeah.
When we were in high school, there was like no more than like 5 non-white people at any given time.
Yeah.
And that's through all 4 years of high school.
Right. It was a very small school, but it was still like white as hell,
Yeah. It was, and so you like look at that those numbers, and it's like hard for me to like, because it's such a wildly different experience from me. And part of that is the times, and part of that is I'm a very different parent than my parents were. And then again, we're in a different place where like it's not Massachusetts and like a Catholic school and
right. Yeah, I mean, like you're at least in like a close suburb of a city, right? Like of a big city. So like naturally there is going to be a lot more diversity in a space like that, and that comes with both. It's like increased exposure and like so it's increased understanding, but also like the differences are more apparent to you. You understand if you understand someone's culture a little bit more, you can understand the foibles of it, or that sounds weird to say, but like understand like how I'm different from you, so we can have a banter about that, and that's where that stuff comes from, which is fine. But
one thing that has suited me really well is that because of that like lack of I think you're like this, maybe less blunt about it, but like you and I don't have that thing, as far as I can tell, that a lot of people have, which is like, oh, I could never talk about race, that would be offensive. So like, and I'm like, like if Logan's best friend is Pakistani, and we were like hanging out with his mother. Sarah and I were hanging out with his mother while they were at the trampoline park, like bouncing one day, like right after the Iran war started. And, and Sarah was like, "Do you know anybody there?" And we had this like conversation, and it was like, and I'm like not afraid to be like, to get into that, and Sarah's not, I think because she's been with me, I think, 15 years ago, Sarah might've been like, but like now, like we're like talking about it in a way that I think models a good thing for Logan, which is that like a respectful curiosity, like, like we're not like, oh, what's a weird thing your culture does, but instead it's more like, oh, like how is this world event affecting your culture or your,
Yeah, no, I think that's the thing. It's like you're genuine about it, and you're like you said, respectful about it, and it comes from a sincere hope to understand. And I think that's an important thing when you're talking to anyone about this stuff. And it's just to say like, tell me about where you're from, or where it all comes from. And like that is, if you present it the right way, no one's going to be offended by that, right? Like
and it's a good way of breaking down, because I think that there are two, that you can be the person who is, I'll say anything, but I don't mean it nicely. And then there's the like, I don't want to say anything, because I don't, and those, neither of those things builds any kind of connection.
No, and exactly. Yeah,
I've really like been lucky that I used to be such an asshole that now I'm like, as long as I'm not an asshole, I can still broach topics with people that other people aren't doing. I when I worked at Circle K, I worked with like, there was like a group of like 7 or 8 black people that sat in a, like we were clustered, not by race, but but like they happened to be sitting next to each other or near each other, and they would have these conversations fairly regularly, and I know what I look like. I am aware that like I don't look like I know jack shit, and so like I'd be like they'd be talking about the best hip hop album ever, and start talking about Illmatic or whatever, and I'm weighing in on the conversation, or they'll talk about like at one point they were talking about the washcloth, and like white people don't use the washcloth, and or they said so, and I'm like, oh, white people don't use the washcloth. And they're like, you don't use the washcloth, and and it was not a problem because I wasn't making them weird. I was making, and I wasn't really necessarily making white people weird. I was just being like, oh yeah, no, that's not a thing like that. That most people white people do. And then they would ask like, do you wash your legs? Because that's like a thing that apparently a lot of white people do. And I'm like, I do now. It hasn't been my whole life. I wish I could say that it had been my whole life. But like we would have these like really genuine conversations, and quickly like people go, oh, like I'm sure that guy has his shitty moments, but like he's not as clanny looking as he
right. Yeah, no, it's 100% that like I think one of the things there that I always think is interesting is like making fun of yourself from a racial perspective or from whatever. Like I think about this a lot with like queer people, because I'm a straight dude. Like my friend and I have this running joke about like how like I've done more gay stuff than like a lot of the bi men that she knows, and it's like I haven't done a lot of gay stuff or anything, but like it's like this like it, and it's okay to just kind of like poke fun at yourself or like make little
I'll even like I will say like to anybody that is not able to do what we're talking about right now, it doesn't have to. If a lot of people don't like the idea of putting down your own race or your own sexuality, or like why do I'm not ashamed to be white or whatever. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be making fun of yourself. It can be showing vulnerability. It can just be like because everything has its benefits and its downsides, right? So like you don't have to be making fun of being straight or being white. You can like I think the like, oh yeah, we don't do that was like not that wasn't a comment on like, oh, that's weird that you do it. It's we don't do that. Like that's not making fun of white people. It's just saying like, oh yeah, that's a difference, and like here from our side, here's what it is. Or I'm I've done more, what you're saying that you've done more gay stuff than bi people. It's like, that's only making fun of yourself if you assume that being gay or doing gay stuff is bad.
Exactly. And like I think sometimes it's like the not using a washcloth thing is like the perfect example of it, because it's like it doesn't really make a difference, I don't think. Like there probably is some benefit.
Well, one of the women asked me, well, what do you do if you get if you get doo-doo on your hand? And I was like, you wash it off. What would you do if you had it on the washcloth? I was like, I don't think that's like a, I mean,
I don't think that's a benefit.
Unfortunately, due to the way that toilet paper works, it happens occasionally regardless, right? Like you hit the dots wrong, and and you've accidentally
but the other side of it is like the washing the legs thing. Like you don't have to be comfortable making fun of yourself, but you can also just say like, oh, I never thought of that, because I remember when like that was going around on Twitter, I was just like, wait, do I don't think I do. Like it was like this. Like
no, the shampoo rolls down and it just all the soap washes.
My legs get wet, right?
That's what the logic was, right? And I think it was on some show. I forget what show it was. It was on some show, and that was the logic that they used. Right. And I don't think I think I'd already addressed the issue, but when somebody had asked me about it years earlier, I had said, well, like the body wash just goes down, so like it's getting everything on the way down. And I'm like, oh, this is a universal truth that they've struck on, or semi-universal, and
because if you're open to those kind of like little like differences that come out, you end up finding things like that where it is like, oh, like maybe this is something that I should change about myself, or maybe this is something like I always think back of like one of my favorite things was one day I was walking through Chicago, and this guy came up to me, and he was like like, hey, give me like $2, I'll sing you a song. And I was like, no, man, that's okay. And then he started singing songs at me to show like that he would actually do it. And he chose like Living on a Prayer and I think it was like Hotel California. And I was like, man, this guy thinks I'm the whitest person in the world.
The Eagles are underrated, but otherwise.
But like, it's like very clearly like white person rock, you know, like
I just had to throw it out there.
Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, this guy thinks I own a boat, you know, like this is, and like, I gotta think about how I present myself in public now so that people don't think I'm this guy.
I think that like vulnerability, that racially, and probably between sexual orientations, that like I think that there's a little bit more of like there's a nervousness, specifically I think with stuffy white people of like. Like, oh, like we don't want to admit that white people aren't great and blah blah. But it to me, I look at it more like the way, like if you look at the less harmful stereotypes about men and women, and like like in the way that like, oh, she likes pink and he likes blue, like the stuff that's not really toxic in and of itself, but that like kinda sometimes comes true. It's similar to that. So it's like I can tease. My wife likes rom-coms and I don't love rom-coms. So, like those kind of teasing things. Yeah. When we get to that level, you can do that. Like that's what the washcloth, and that's what all these other cultural things are. And that breaks down a lot of that barrier in a way that isn't like, I mean, I am struggling to think of like a big cultural difference between, and again, I'm thinking Black people, but it could be Hispanic, Asian, any other group of people. But like, I can't think of a thing. If you take religion out, because religion can be a pretty big problem, back and forth. But like, if you just take out like just general culture of like Black Christian Americans, white Christian Americans, Asian Christian Americans, like what are the cultural differences that are like not pretty surface level? Right. Like not, and obviously music, food, but like again, and I don't mean that those.
But there's also a lot of crossover in those things. Like, I mean, like, like people will sometimes get surprised that like an old white lady likes like Motown, and it's like, why? That's like been popular music for 70 years, or something like that. Like, or like it would be weird if she was into like Dr. Dre or something, but like also that's not that weird because old white ladies.
And he's 60.
But like there's like those. I
like The Chronic, but I'm not that big of a fan of what was the 2001 album?
Is it just called 2001, or it's like 2001?
I think you're right.
The something or something. But like there's like, or like soul food or something like that. Like. Everyone likes that food, like if you like no one's like complaining about going and eating at a soul food restaurant, like those are things that are, like,
and like when you like recognize why cultures are the way they are, that is pretty interesting. Like, okay, this is like, I know that like a lot of people like to joke that white people don't have culture. One of the things that I learned from Alex, my producer on the show, is that one of the reasons why we have the stereotype of we don't like spice on our foods is because when spice became something that everyone could afford again, like like spice, 400, 500 years ago, spice was this like commodity, right? And then when spice became a thing that everyone could have and use, the rich people were like, well, now it's too common. We will not have spiced foods. And so now we have, and essentially that is how white culture, and if you look at like stuff in the 50s, like all those cookbooks from the 50s that like everybody's family has, they don't want you to spice your food more than a tiny bit of salt and pepper so that the other person can just add the spice they want. And all of these things built into this system so that now white people are known for not spicing our foods. And it's like, which I agree and I get it. And you go home and you're like, we don't. Nobody in this family spices the foods except for when it's Italian food because we're Italian, And there is that generic thing, but it comes from a real thing, or you'd learn about the soul foods was what they could get, at a certain time, and they made the most of it, and they made this culinary masterpiece with something that was very easily attainable for them, or
like the leftovers of stuff, like collard greens were cheap or easy to find, and they became
Asian people. Asian cuisine has rice a lot because they had the right
conditions to grow
rice, and so like none of these things are like, that's not bad, like none of those things are bad. I mean, when you look into like some of the like black stuff, it can be bad because it was forced upon them, and like
then it becomes at the same time like it's such an important part of the culture, and it becomes a great story of like people making the most of and creating.
So you're saying that
totally
they learned skills that were useful to cooking skills that were useful from slavery. Is that what you're
saying? Exactly. Yes. I think slavery was a good thing now.
Yeah. Well, we can tell just by looking at you that you think that, because you are the whitest guy.
That's true. That's true.
Without Matthew here, I feel like I have to joke more, but also this being an offensive humor episode, we got to keep it up.
Yeah, we got to be open to it. Yeah, but like it is a thing, like like it becomes this like kind of like beautiful story. Like I'm big into like jazz music, and it's a similar thing where it was like they had to jazz or blues music was essentially like they took like music that they had played in Africa that got passed down through generations of slaves, and figured out how to play it on American instruments. Yeah. And that became the roots of blues, jazz, and
music. Music's like tough though, because there is almost no music that wasn't black originally.
Right. Like unless you're doing like European classical, it's
or it's like Mozart.
Like But most popular music is essentially goes right back down to black people. Yes. But that's such a great story, and something that's worth like celebrating and exploring and talking about. As this is a fantastic thing that we share, because we grew up on the same culture.
Yeah, I agree. I also think, like, just back to my jokes throughout this episode, like, I've been trying to keep them offensive if you're not paying attention, but also like, like I think that's part of that's what I was trying to be, it's one of those things that we need to talk about, is what is the intent of the offensive joke. And so like when I said the thing to you just that was kind of a good example. Didn't do it on purpose. When I said the thing about like making fun of you for saying that, that I'm making fun of you, teasing you about the fact that some people, white people, recently have said that thing. I am not making fun of black people, and like that is the difference between the way, like the kind of offensive humor I like, which is like, if you're not paying attention, sure, it all sounds the same. It all is about, black culture. It's all about this. But when you pay attention, it's not. Like you look at Robert Downey Jr., like in Tropic Thunder.
Yeah.
A large part, like I watch a lot of YouTube, and I listen to a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of black people on YouTube who are like, that doesn't bother me. Like all of their blackface I don't want to see, or unless it's like in a dramatic piece and that is being exposed, and they're like, but it's a comedic piece that's being exposed. It's not it wasn't
it's taking it to an extreme, and is making fun of that actor.
It's making fun of how far white actors will go. And a lot of people
thing with like the other part of that movie, the was it Simple Jack, kind of thing. Like it's making fun of those, like characters doing the math of, you cannot play a fully mentally disabled person. You have to do Forrest Gump, and like that is so like like craven, kind of like calculating, cynical, that's the way you win an Oscar kind of thing. That like that's what makes that funny, not the fact that Ben Stiller played a mentally disabled man,
And when and it was funny, like I remember having a conversation a few years after that came out about that movie with with a white person who I think is probably, if we're being honest, this is probably a racist white person.
Yes.
And talking about that movie, and they were like, and you know, you'd be surprised that like if people took offense with the use of the R slur, or they said the word, they didn't say the R slur,
of course.
Instead of the thing that you would have thought they'd have been offended by. And it's like, no, but they actually use the R word, and that part is sloppy. That is sloppy compared to the way that they do all the other comedy in that.
Yeah.
And the critique of taking it so far that you will do blackface.
Yeah.
And even having a character say like, I came here because there was one part for a black guy and they gave it to a Australian Crocodile Dundee and you know, and so I had to represent and like there's like all kinds of commentary on it.
Right.
And none of it is anti-black.
Right.
There is a lot of commentary, like you just said, about the mentally handicapped part. And other than that one conversation where they are just having fun with using the word.
Right.
Like,
that's true. Yes.
Like you could have gotten that point across with one or two uses, but they use it like 10 to 12 times over the course of 30 seconds.
Right.
Like they are having fun with that word.
Right.
Which at the time didn't bother me. I probably, like, I haven't seen it in a while because I can't watch it with Logan.
Yeah.
I still think that's one of the greatest comedies ever. But that doesn't mean that they don't have those misses.
Yes.
You know, and like and I don't think that, like, I think from everything I know about Ben Stiller, he seems like a genuinely caring person who would never do that on purpose.
Right.
We were not quite there on that word yet, the way we are now. Because that movie's almost 20 years old now.
Right.
And then B, it was somewhat sloppy, even because the backlash was happening to some degree at the time. I think now we look at it and go, "Oh, that is not right."
Right.
But I think, like, I think if you look at the way that that's aged, the R word seems bad.
Yeah.
The blackface seems like they are not making fun of black people, which is why blackface has been a problem.
Yes. Yeah.
They're making fun of white people, and so like that is a really, that's where you get into like. Offensive humor can be funny and can stick and can land.
Yeah.
And it's real. It's just more delicate. And it comes back to that, like the art of doing it that Anthony Jeselnik talks about, like that, like if you land it right and you do it right, that's where the art comes in.
Right.
And that's, you know, like there's so many examples of like, the reason why that worked and it wouldn't work otherwise is because you wouldn't get somebody who is putting that much thought and, you know.
Right. I think the example I always think of like where there was some like well-meaning in it, but it just really ended up failing.
Soul Man. No, from everything I've heard, Soul Man was not trying to.
I believe that.
It was not trying to do blackface the way blackface has historically been. It's not like a minstrelsy. It was supposed to be kind of revealing this hypocrisy, but it just, especially in 35 years later, does not land.
Right, does not look good. But I was thinking of like Apu from The Simpsons. There was like a big controversy about that, and I think the interesting thing that I've always thought about that was like it's such an own goal on their part because there's some things that are messy about Apu as like a character from as a representation of Indian people, but in the 90s he was one of the few Indian people on network TV. Yeah. The fact that was what made that offensive was it was Hank Azaria voicing him and, like doing a silly voice. And, writers who didn't know anything about Indian culture kind of like throwing things together. And they could have gotten away with that. That probably would have aged better if they had just cast an Indian person to voice Apu. And it probably would have worked. Like, it would probably hold up better now because you'd have, like some of those jokes probably don't land now, but like some of them are fine. It's like, Indian food's spicy. It's a little bit maybe lazy, but but it was still, this is something, this is the most like easiest way for me to learn about Indian culture is Apu from The Simpsons as a white kid from the suburbs. Even though there's a lot of Indian people where we grew up, but like I didn't know them well. But like it's just such an interesting thing to think about. Like if you had just done this slightly differently, you could have made all those jokes and made them, and they still would have been, slightly offensive, but they would have held up a lot better. And you could probably still have the character on The Simpsons today, which he hasn't been on in, 15 years or something like that. And like, you wouldn't have had a documentary made about this character. Like, it wouldn't feel like a big black mark on The Simpsons, like
it's a great example for a whole bunch of reasons, and like everything you just said, but also Hari Kondabolu, who made the documentary. I watched it, and I remember watching it, and people being. I've never really been into The Simpsons because I wasn't allowed to watch it as a kid, and I watched it, and like he's not really like that, pissed off. Like he's like Hank Azaria, was given a thing to do, and he did it, and he doesn't seem to have any real animosity. He's like I get that at the time it didn't make much sense, and I think every time I've heard him talk about it, outside the documentary, he's like, like we had a conversation, and he seemed like very nice about it, and he had to give it some thought, and I think very quickly afterwards they stopped doing the character, and it was like he hasn't had that big of a problem with it from what I've seen. And then I remember watching, because, we grew up with a lot of people that loved The Simpsons, and people would be the same person that I was talking about a minute ago. They said something along the lines of it was never offensive before. Fuck this guy, blah, blah, blah. He can't take a joke. And I'm like, did you watch the documentary? Like, it's pretty nuanced and like thoughtful. And also it's not like, fuck The Simpsons. It's like, I love The Simpsons. I just never liked that part. I didn't like that other kids would be like, oh, are you a poo? Like, which is like, to some extent, that is, those are things that like The Simpsons probably could never have imagined. And the fact that The Simpsons then addressed it and handled it correctly is this great achievement on their part.
I also think it's so interesting with those things that it's always like, oh, this was never offensive before. And it's like, has that guy ever talked to an Indian person about that? Like,
Did Indian people have a voice to voice that before? Like, that's a big thing we hear about when we hear about, like, why is this all of a sudden a problem? It's like, because all of a sudden we're listening to Indian people or black people or women or gay people, and it's like, gay people might not have spoken up about all the homophobia in the 50s because they might have gotten in trouble or gotten hurt.
Like, if you don't have the opportunity to speak about it, then of course you're not going to get hurt about it. So it is like a
when did the Redskins become an offensive team name? I don't know. Like,
and that's something that always gets brought up about, like, no, this was around for like 70 years and no one complained about it until 2005 or whatever. It's like, and then we started listening to people who actually were complaining about it, and it makes a lot of sense that we would start saying, hey, this is kind of an awful thing for a major, NFL team to be named.
Back to the, like, I think that the problem is broader than we think, is like, if you made a team 100 years ago, whenever the NFL teams were, I know the NFL wasn't really 100 years ago, but some of the teams did exist, right? You make a team in the South, most likely. That's the N-words. You make that team. There would be a large contingent of people that are like, the Redskins should be the Redskins forever, being like, this should be the N-words forever. There would be some of those people that are like, I think the Redskins should stay the Redskins. That would be like, well, that's a bridge too far. And I think that that's where we go, okay, well, those people are reachable. But there are the people, like, I think that you would genuinely get, I mean, we don't like to use that word all the time now, but like the N-words has been like it's a NFL institution. Like,
Did you, there was a sports writer who used to be on ESPN. I think he's still on ESPN. I just don't watch ESPN anymore, but named Bomani Jones. And one day he went on and he was wearing it was the Cleveland Indians, but it was their, they had that Chief Wahoo logo that was like the smiling red-faced Indian. And he went on with a shirt that said Caucasians, and it was like a smiling, like, Simpsons yellow white person on it, like in the same style. And they got so many calls from white people being like, why the hell is he allowed to wear that shirt on TV? And it's like, you don't put that connection together that this is, you're complaining about the thing that you would never complain about when you see Chief Wahoo on the Cleveland Indians uniform, like, and thankfully that's changed, and like that's gone. But it's people have that disconnect of not understanding that if you're offended by something as a white person, it makes sense that someone would be offended by that same style of joke about their racial identity.
The people who don't get that are the same people who want to who think they could fight the bear. Yes. And I would like to encourage those people.
Yes.
Prove me wrong. All right. We should probably start wrapping things up.
Yeah. My dog is howling at me now.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
Of course.
I got to do all the sign-off stuff today because Matthew's not here. We want to thank Pat for coming on and Sam in the background. But if you haven't already, hit like and subscribe below. That's a great way to help the show. We've got, like I've mentioned a few times in the last few weeks, we've got a documentary coming out in like probably 3 or 4 more weeks.
Can't wait to see it.
Yeah, and then we will, that will probably be. They'll be on this channel, not on the Chocolate Diamond channel. If you want to support the show in other ways, you can go on patreon.com/talking about the big stuff. There you can like it for free. That's always a great way to just boost us in the algorithm. There's the $1 option, which is $1 a month. All these prices are per month, not per episode. And that gets you early access. The $3 version gets you extra stuff, which on like an episode like this, there's probably going to be a fair amount of that. And then the $10 version gets you the pre-show stuff, which Pat was nice enough to jump on and do some pre-show conversation with me, mostly about that podcast, but like, or not about the podcast, about the documentary. So yeah, go to patreon.com/talking about the big stuff if you want to support us. And again, like and subscribe, comment, tell us what kind of offensive jokes you like to make. Don't give us an example. I don't know that the YouTube comment section can handle that. Please no slurs. There's some level of mod that it stops, but I don't know. And then we will actually I've already booked a guest for next week. We're going to be talking about dating in your 50s. Someone's coming on. Matthew told me that they are piss your pants hilarious. So if you haven't, if you subscribe, you'll get a notification about that next Monday at 6:30.